The scent of their new home still held a whisper of fresh paint and cut lumber, a clean, hopeful smell that I associated with fresh starts. I stood in the doorway for a moment, just watching. Sunlight, the kind of pale gold that only exists in late afternoon, streamed through the large window overlooking the backyard, catching dust motes dancing in the air like tiny fairies. James had his back to me, his shoulders broader than I remembered them being just a few years ago. He was gently swaying from side to side, a slow, rhythmic motion that was both new and ancient. In his arms, swaddled in a soft, blue blanket, was my grandson. LJ, little James. The name was a tribute that filled my chest with a warmth so profound it was almost painful. I had sacrificed everything for the man holding that baby. Every double shift, every missed party, every silent Christmas when the only gift under our small tree was something I had sewn myself from fabric remnants. I had worn my exhaustion like a second skin, all so that James could have a future unburdened by the struggles I had known. And now, looking at him in this beautiful, modern house, with a beautiful wife and this perfect child, I felt a deep, settling peace. It was all worth it. Every single second. "Mom," James said, turning with a smile that reached his eyes. He looked tired, but it was a good tired, a fulfilled tired. "You are just in time." LJ was getting fussy, but I think I have found the magic sway. "You have the touch," I said, my voice thick with emotion. I walked further into the room, my eyes fixed on the baby. He had a dusting of fine, dark hair, and his little fist was curled near his cheek. He was the most exquisite thing I had ever seen. "He is perfect, James, just perfect." Simone came in from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. She moved with a new mother's combination of weariness and grace. Her smile towards me was polite, but I saw the slight tension around her eyes. I told myself it was just the fatigue. It was a monumental thing, bringing a new life home. "Ruth, would you like some tea?" she asked. "I would love some, thank you, Simone," I said, my gaze drifting back to LJ. "But please let me get it, you should sit, rest." "It is no trouble," she said, and she turned back to the kitchen. I felt a small pang, a desire to be the one to take care of her, to take care of all of them. That was my role, that was what a mother does. I settled onto the plush sofa, its gray fabric cool against my skin. James carefully transferred LJ into my arms. The weight of him was a solid, warm promise. I breathed in his scent, that singular baby smell of milk and innocence. I felt decades younger in that moment, all the worries of my own life melting away. This was my reward. This was the joy I had earned. "He feels so light," I murmured, adjusting the blanket around him. My fingers, roughened by years of work, felt clumsy against his incredible softness. "Are you sure he is warm enough? There is a bit of a draft from that window." It was a simple observation, a grandmother's care. I was merely noticing. The house was modern, with high ceilings and large windows that were beautiful but could be drafty. A baby needed to be kept warm. It was common sense. I saw James and Simone exchange a look. It was quick, a fleeting moment of silent communication that excluded me completely. Simone's smile tightened. "The pediatrician said he is fine," Simone said, her voice carefully neutral. "We have the thermostat set exactly as recommended." "Of course," I said quickly, feeling a flush creep up my neck. "I am sure you do, my hands are always cold, it is probably just me." I tried to laugh it off, but the sound felt brittle. The harmony of the moment had developed a tiny, almost invisible crack. I had only meant to help. Why did it feel like I had said something wrong? The rest of the visit continued with a strained politeness. We drank our tea. I told James he looked like he had lost weight, that he should let me bring over a casserole. He laughed and said they were drowning in food from friends. Simone mentioned that they were following a strict schedule for the baby, something recommended by a sleep consultant. I nodded, but inside I thought, a schedule? Babies need love, not schedules. I did not say it, though. I held my tongue and focused on the miracle in my arms. When it was time for LJ's feeding, Simone took him from me. The loss of his warmth was immediate. I busied myself with gathering my purse and jacket, the familiar objects feeling alien in my hands. James walked me to the door. "It was so good to see you, Mom," he said, pulling me into a hug. He smelled of laundry detergent and faintly of his son. My son. I clung to him for a second longer than necessary. "It is the greatest joy of my life, seeing you like this," I whispered into his shoulder. You are such a wonderful father already." He squeezed me tighter. Then he pulled back, his hands resting on my shoulders. His expression had changed. The easy smile was gone, replaced by a gentle seriousness that made my heart beat a little faster. "Mom, can we talk for a second, outside?" A cold trickle of dread started in my stomach. "Of course, honey. Is everything all right?" He did not answer, just opened the front door and guided me out onto the porch. The evening air was cool, a sharp contrast to the warmth inside. The sky was turning a deep violet, and the streetlights had just begun to hum to life. James shoved his hands into his pockets and looked at his shoes for a moment before meeting my eyes. "Mom, I love how much you love LJ," he began, and the way he started with love made the dread solidify into a hard knot. "And we love having you here, truly." "But," I prompted, the word hanging in the air between us. He sighed, a sound full of regret. "But Simone, we need to find our own way as parents. And some of the things you say, the little suggestions, like about the blanket or the schedule, they feel like criticism to her." I felt as if the ground had shifted under my feet. "Criticism? James, it is not criticism. It is care. It is what families do. I have done this before. I am only trying to help." "I know," he said, his voice soft but firm. "I know that is your intention, but it is not helping. It is making Simone feel like she is not good enough, and it is making me feel stuck in the middle." Each word was a small, precise puncture to the careful world I had built around this new chapter of my life. Stuck in the middle. He was my son. There was no middle. There was only us and now them. "What are you saying, James?" My voice was barely a whisper. He looked pained, but he did not look away. "I am saying that we need you to be Nana, not a manager. We need you to just enjoy him, with us, without the advice unless we ask for it." Unless we ask for it. The words echoed in my head, an unsolicited advice embargo, a gentle ultimatum. It was not a request, it was a redefinition of my role. It was a demotion from mother to visitor. The love that I had, the vast, oceanic love that had defined my entire existence, was suddenly being framed as a problem. Something to be managed, contained. I looked at my son, at the man I had raised with every fiber of my being, and I saw a stranger. I saw the protector of his new family, and in order to protect them, he was asking me to step back, to make myself smaller, to love them less, or at least, to love them more quietly. The porch light flickered on, activated by the growing darkness. It illuminated the profound hurt on my face, I was sure. James's expression was full of love and pity, a combination that was more devastating than anger ever could be. "Mom," he said, his voice tentative, "do you understand what I am asking?" I opened my mouth to answer, to tell him that I did not understand, that I could not understand how love could ever be wrong. But the words would not come. All I could do was nod, a slow, mechanical movement that felt like a betrayal of my own heart. The chapter of my life that had begun with such warmth was ending on the porch, in the cooling air, with a chasm opening between me and the person I loved most in the world. And I had no idea how I would ever cross it. The silence in the house was a physical presence after James left. It was not the quiet of peace, but the heavy, suffocating hush that follows a thunderclap. I stood in the same spot by the kitchen sink for a long time, my hands still damp, staring at the doorway he had vanished through. His words, "I want Simone to have it," echoed in the hollow space, each repetition a fresh sting. My son, my James. The ring was not just a piece of jewelry. It was a thread in the tapestry of our family, a story whispered in gold and sapphire. It was the ring my own mother wore for 50 years, the one she pressed into my hand the day I told her I was pregnant, her eyes glistening with a future she would not live to see. To give it to Simone, a woman he had known for a year, felt like an erasure. It felt like a betrayal. The sadness was a cold weight in my chest, but as the hours bled into the evening, it began to curdle. It transformed into a quiet, insidious suspicion. I started to see Simone's influence everywhere, a pattern I had been too blind, too hopeful to see before. The way she would subtly correct a family story he was telling. The way her hand would rest on his arm, a possessive gesture, whenever our conversation became too lively, too reminiscent of a past she did not share. That comment she made last Christmas, a light, almost joking remark about how clingy families could stunt a person's growth. I had laughed it off then. Now, It felt like a calculated seed, planted and nurtured. Was she systematically unraveling the threads that bound him to me? Was she the architect of this new, distant version of my son? I could not sit still. The four walls of the living room were closing in on me, each familiar object. The worn armchair his father used to occupy, the framed school photo of James's gap-toothed grin seeming to accuse me of some failure. I needed to do something to fight back, but the battlefield was in his heart, a place I no longer seemed to have access to. An idea, desperate and frail, began to form. The attic. There were boxes up there, archives of his childhood. I would find photographs. The good ones, of him and me building sandcastles at the beach, of Christmases with wrapping paper strewn everywhere, of him falling asleep on my lap. I would make an album, a tangible history. I would remind him of the love that existed long before Simone. The pull-down ladder groaned in protest, a sound of long disuse. The air in the attic was thick and still, smelling of dried-out wood and memories. A single, bare bulb cast long, dancing shadows behind stacks of boxes labeled in my own handwriting. James grade school, winter clothes, baby items. My heart ached just reading the words. I found the box I was looking for, a large cardboard container marked Jay's keepsakes. I dragged it toward the dim pool of light. Sitting on the dusty floorboards, I lifted the lid. The scent of old paper and forgotten things rose to meet me. On top lay his first pair of baby shoes, impossibly small. Beneath that, a tangled mess of friendship bracelets and dried-out markers. I began to sift through the layers of his life, each object a landmark. A ribbon from a science fair. A program from his high school graduation. The brittle petals of a corsage from his senior prom. I was looking for the photo albums, the big leather-bound ones, but they were not here. This box was different. It was a haphazard collection, things he had chosen to keep secret, to squirrel away from my more organized curations. At the very bottom, tucked beneath a stack of baseball cards bound by a rubber band, my fingers brushed against something that was not cardboard or plastic. It was the soft, pebbled texture of an old photograph. My breath caught. This was not one of mine. I pulled it out carefully. The colors were faded to a muted sepia, the edges soft with age. It was a picture of a little boy, no more than 2 years old, sitting on the shoulders of a man. The boy was James, his face a perfect moon of delight, one chubby hand tangled in the man's dark hair. The man was grinning up at him, his face young, unlined, and achingly familiar. It was Marcus. A cold that had nothing to do with the attic air seeped into my bones. Marcus, the father who had walked out one evening for a pack of cigarettes when James was 3 and never came back. The man whose name I had not spoken in this house for decades. Why would James have this? I had destroyed all the photographs of Marcus, or so I thought. I had purged our lives of his ghost, believing I was protecting my son, building a fortress around him with my own 2 hands. But here he was, preserved in the secret shrine. James's smile in the photo was radiant, unburdened. A smile I had not seen directed at me in a very long time. My hands were trembling. As I turned the photograph over, something else fluttered to the floor. A single sheet of paper, folded neatly. It was modern printer paper, stark white against the dusty floorboards. This was not a relic. This was recent. A dread, cold and sharp, began to prick at my skin. I unfolded it. The letterhead was simple, just an email address. The date at the top was from 6 months ago. The handwriting was not James's. It was a bold, slashing script I had never seen before, yet I knew, with a certainty that turned my stomach to ice, who it belonged to. James asterisk. Just a quick note to thank you for the dinner last week. It is always a pleasure to see you. You have grown into such a remarkable man, and it is a privilege to watch you navigate your life with such strength and clarity. Our conversations mean more to me than I can adequately express. Hearing about your career, your plans with Simone, it fills me with a pride I know I have not earned, but one I feel all the same. You are building a wonderful future for yourself. Thank you for your generosity of spirit, for allowing me this second chance. In many ways, you are the one guiding me now. Your father asterisk. Marcus. P.S. Your mother would not understand. Some histories are too painful to revisit. Our connection is ours alone. The words swam before my eyes. Our conversations, your plans with Simone, a pride I know I have not earned, your mother would not understand. The paper rattled in my shaking hand. A year. They had been in contact for over a year, meeting for dinners, sharing secrets. My son had been leading a double life, and the man he was thanking for making him, the man he is today, was not the man who taught him to ride a bike or who stayed up with him when he was sick. That man was a ghost. The real father, the one who had stayed, was a ghost, replaced by the shimmering, forgiven image of the one who had left. The betrayal was so immense, so absolute, it did not feel like a knife to the heart. It felt like the ground itself had dissolved beneath me. I was falling through the floorboards of my own life, through decades of what I had believed was truth. I had been so worried about the future, about Simone stealing him away, that I had never once looked back to see that the past had already been poisoned. The enemy was not the woman beside him. The enemy was the shadow from behind, the one I thought I had locked away forever. I sat there on the attic floor, the faded photograph in one hand, the damning letter in the other, the dust of a life I no longer recognized settling over me. The silence was no longer just heavy. It was complicit, and in the heart of that silence, a single, terrifying question began to scream, "What else has he hidden from me?" The silence in my apartment was a physical presence, a heavy, cold thing that had settled in the hours since James had walked out. I did not move from the armchair. The world outside the window shifted from the deep indigo of twilight to the flat black of night, but I did not turn on a lamp. The darkness felt appropriate, a shroud for the death of something I had believed was unshakable. My son's words, "I have a father," played on a loop in my mind, each repetition a fresh crack in the foundation of my soul. I had built my entire life upon that foundation. Now it was dust. I must have dozed because the sharp, insistent buzz of the doorbell jolted me awake. The digital clock on the stove glowed 8:03 a.m. morning. It had come regardless. I rose slowly, my bones feeling ancient, and went to the intercom. I did not need to ask who it was. When I opened the door, James stood there. He looked as though he had not slept at all. His eyes were red-rimmed, his shoulders slumped under his jacket. He did not look angry. He looked exhausted, hollowed out. In his hand, he held a small, white paper bag from the bakery I liked. The normalcy of the gesture, the heartbreaking attempt at a peace offering, undid me more than any shout ever could. "May I come in?" he asked, his voice rough. I nodded, stepping aside. The air in the room was still thick with the unresolved conflict from the night before. He placed the bag on the kitchen counter. "I brought you a croissant." "Thank you," I said, my own voice a whisper. We stood there, two statues in a museum of our own shared history, unable to meet each other's eyes. I knew I had to speak. The weight of my grief was too immense to carry alone. "James," I began, and the words felt like shards of glass in my throat. "I do not understand. I have spent my whole life, every decision, every sacrifice was for you, to give you a better life than I had, to protect you." I finally looked at him, and the tears I had been holding back began to fall, slow and hot. "I have loved you with every ounce of my being. Was that not enough? Why was I not enough?" He flinched as if I had struck him. "Mother, no, that is not it. You were always enough. You are enough." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I knew so well. "It was never about you not being enough." "Then what was it about?" I asked, my voice rising slightly, the pain turning sharp. "Was it because of what I said about the baby? I was wrong. I know I was wrong. I was scared, James. I was scared of being pushed out. I am sorry. I am so sorry." "It is not about the baby," he exploded, and the force of it made me step back. He took a deep, shuddering breath, trying to compose himself. "That comment, it was the last straw, Mother. It was the clearest example of a pattern I have lived with my entire life." I stared at him bewildered. "A pattern? What pattern?" He looked at me then, really looked at me, and his eyes were filled with a pity that was more devastating than any anger. "The pattern of your pain, the weight of what Dad did to us. You carried it like a crown of thorns, and you never knew that the points were digging into me, too." The room seemed to tilt. I reached for the back of the armchair to steady myself. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I found Marcus because I needed to understand the half of me that was a mystery. The half that came from the man who left. You never spoke of him, and when you did, it was only with bitterness. You built a fortress around us, and I was safe inside, but I was also a prisoner. I never knew what parts of me were me, and what parts were just echoes of the ghost you hated." I wanted to protest, to tell him he was wrong, but the words would not come. A cold dread was seeping into my veins. He continued, his voice lower now, measured. Simone, she comes from this big, messy, complicated family. They fight, they make up, they talk about everything. She was the one who helped me see it. She said that my love for you was so fierce because it was always tied to a sense of duty, to the knowledge that I was your whole world. That is a heavy thing for a child to carry. She pointed out how you would get this look in your eye, this flinch, whenever I did something that reminded you of him. The way I laugh sometimes, the way I argue a point, you would shut down. You would become quiet and cold. I learned to edit myself, Mother. I learned to be the son you needed me to be, the son who would never, ever leave you. Each word was a hammer blow, shattering the glass case in which I had preserved our perfect history. I saw it all with horrifying clarity. The times I had withdrawn when his stubbornness reminded me of his father. The way I had subtly steered him away from interests I deemed frivolous, the kind of things his father had enjoyed. The unspoken rule that our bond was sacrosanct, a world of two against the world. I had thought I was protecting him. I had been building my own monument to my survival, using him as the cornerstone. I did not know, I whispered, sinking into the chair. The grief was no longer just for the betrayal. It was for the thousands of tiny betrayals I had committed against him, unknowingly, every day of his life. James, I did not know I was doing that. I know you did not, he said softly, kneeling in front of me. I know you never meant to hurt me. Your love for me is the most real thing in my life. But it came with conditions I did not understand until I had a life of my own. I needed to find Marcus to see if there was anything of value in that other half. And there is. He is not a good man, not really. He is weak and he is selfish. But talking to him, it was like untangling a knot inside me. I could finally separate his legacy from my own identity. The truth was icy, so cold it burned. It was not about replacing me. It was about James finding himself, and the greatest obstacle to that search had been the fortress of my own trauma. I had been so busy fighting the ghost of his father that I had failed to see I was haunting my own son. I am so sorry, I said, and this time the apology was different. It was not for a single comment, it was for a lifetime. It was for the weight he had carried. I was so broken by what happened that I broke you too. I never wanted that. You did not break me, he said, taking my hand. His was warm. You made me strong, but now I need to be strong for my own family, for Simone, for my son. The mention of her name brought a fresh wave of shame. Simone, I have been so unfair to her. I saw her as a threat. I owe her an apology more profound than I can ever express. She knows that, James said. She is waiting in the car. My head snapped up. She is here. She would not let me come alone. She said this was about all of us. The grace in that simple act, the solidarity, overwhelmed me. This woman I had resented had shown more kindness and understanding than I had ever offered her. Please, I said, my voice choked, please ask her to come up. James went to the intercom and spoke softly. A few minutes later, there was a gentle knock. I opened the door to Simone. Her face was pale and anxious, but she met my gaze directly. Ruth, she said. Simone, I could barely get the word out. I owe you the most sincere apology. I have been jealous and cruel. I said a terrible thing about your parenting, and it was born from my own fear and my own damaged heart. You have been nothing but good to my son, and you are going to be a wonderful mother. I am so very sorry. Tears welled in her eyes. Thank you, Ruth, that means a great deal. She hesitated, then stepped forward and embraced me. It was a brief, stiff hug, but it was a beginning, a thawing. We sat together, the three of us, and we talked. The conversation was painful and halting, but it was honest. For the first time, I listened more than I spoke. I saw the partnership between James and Simone not as a conspiracy against me, but as a sanctuary for him. I saw the strength in her quiet compassion. A few weeks later, I held my grandson for the first time. His name was Leo. As I looked down at his tiny, perfect face, I made a silent vow. I would not lay my burdens on him. I would not see him as my second chance or a vessel for my regrets. He was his own person, a new story just beginning. I would love him simply for who he was, and in doing so, I would finally free us all. The peace felt fragile, like the first thin ice on a winter pond. It was a new understanding, but the habits of a lifetime are not shed so easily. As I handed Leo back to his mother, I saw the faint shadow of a question in her eyes, a hesitation, a memory of my past sharpness. I had been forgiven, but I had not yet been fully trusted. The path to earning that trust stretched out before me, long and uncertain, and I knew a single misstep could bring the walls tumbling down again. The work was only just beginning.